podcast. So thought we'd start by introducing each other. So we're all old school friends. My name's Hattie. Got Jack over there and Dennis down there, depending on where you're looking. So we're all big music fans. We thought we'd decide to talk about it because we talk about it in real life. Thought we'd decide to get other people in on it. So just to give you guys a heads up, we're going to be trying to review an album every week and also have a general music discussion. So yeah, say hi, guys.
Hello.
Hi, guys.
Hello, guys. So today, what have we got? What album have we got?
Today we're going to be looking at Ohms by Deftones, which came out, I want to say, September 25th, which, if I've got that right.
I think that's right.
I will be very surprised, but yeah, not the newest of new releases, but not too old. I'm just giving people name tags as well. I don't know why I didn't think of that before. But why don't you start us off with some general thoughts, Hattie?
Sure. So yeah, I mean, I'd say in general, in terms of my appreciation for Deftones, I'd say I've been a casual fan. I've liked a few of their albums, but I wouldn't necessarily say I go back to them a lot. As you guys know, I was a big fan of Diamond Eyes, and that was the last album that really captured my attention. The kind of few they released after that, I don't know, I've not been that fussed. I think what I liked the most was the kind of heaviness of Diamond Eyes. And I found on this album they captured that a lot. Some of the best riffing that I think I've heard from Deftones in general. And they've always had a good balance between the kind of light and the heavy, which I thought, they perfected. A few gripes. The main thing I would say would be some of the vocal melodies on tracks. I found, the vocals tended to be the part that let it down. But yeah, what do you guys think?
Do you want to go next, Dennis?
Yeah, I agree with you in that the riff work was really, really good on this. I think, to be honest, because I'm in the same boat as you. I was never really a Deftones fanboy. They're always there. I mean, I'm a huge new metal fan, huge fan of Korn, huge fan of Slipknot, huge fan of that movement. But Deftones always sort of slipped through the net. So I was going through their discography as well whilst listening to this album and trying to compare the different albums. And yeah, the riffs always stand out. They write some really tasty riffs that stick with you. Yeah, the one difference, I agree with you on that. The one difference within this album is just how heavy it is compared to the other albums. Riffwork is that I heard a interview with Chino Marino, who was discussing this particular album, and he said the last couple of attempts that they've had, the last couple of albums that they've had, what the technique that they would usually have is Chino and Abe Cunningham would start off a song, and the guitarist, I can't remember his name off the top of my head.
Stephen Carpenter.
That's the one. Stephen would then be sort of trapped trying to find like a place within the song that these guys have already made up.
What does Abe play? Sorry, what instrument?
Abe is the drummer.
Drummer, okay. Yeah, that's an odd combination for kind of starting a song, drummer and vocalist.
Yeah, I think they're like they're closer friends, something like that. You do get that with bands sometimes, don't you? But they're just friends, and yeah, it ends up being a strange person who ends up writing the songs. But in this album, what he was saying was it was a lot more balanced. It was a lot more democratic in that they got Steve much more involved in the songwriting, so he wasn't like sort of trying to find his way. And I think you can hear that as well. Like, going through their other albums, I found the main difference with this album is they all got to shine a lot more. In particular, like Frank Delgado, the synth guy or the effects guy, I think he was a lot more involved in it. You could hear his influence a lot more in the songs.
Yeah, there were a few songs in the midsection they were just kind of like instrumental, like ambient bits. I believe it was the end of Pompeii into Lincoln's Dead. There was a good minute and a half of just kind of like ambient synth work, which I haven't really heard much from them before. But yeah, just to mirror your point there.
Yeah, and another little section where it was just kind of, just kind of mellow was the spell of mathematics. There was a little section. I mean, the song itself, I think, is mediocre, but there's a little section sort of
really.
Third.
That was one of my favorite tracks, man.
All right, we're circling back to this. We're circling back to this.
Yeah. We're gonna do a top 3, I think, viewers. So the end we'll cap our like 3 favorite tracks. But yeah, already there's some beef going on. Shit.
I will say though, that little section in the last sort of third of Spell of Mathematics, I could listen to that all day. It's such a nice little, like almost like a breakdown.
But it was just bass and drums, right? The guitarist, there was no guitars, and it was just like a vocal over. Yeah. That was fucking dank, that bit.
Yeah, with some effects in the background from Frank Delgado, I think, as well. Yeah. So atmospheric, so good.
Yeah.
I think that was actually
what about
one of my bigger gripes with the album was the level of synth and kind of effects, ambient sounds there were in it. I felt like instead of settling in comfortable grooves for the songs to exist in, there was almost like all of the songs had to ebb and flow, and they all had to have these sections in them. And I feel like the album as a whole kind of reflects that as well, because for me, a lot of the tracks that I prefer, they kind of start off with like usually something really heavy coming out of an ambient section on the last track, and then most of the ones that I like kind of kept that and had minimal complete drop of that energy that they had at the beginning and replacing it with the ambient stuff, but they had it being benefited by levels put on top of it in effects rather than pulling out what they already established.
I think it's good song.
Stuff like Spell of Mathematics has loads of sections where the heavy comes back in like a brick wall and just slaps. Radiant City was also my notes for
that
Radiant
riff,
City.
That riff.
My notes start with all caps, that bass, the drums.
Yeah. Well, that song in particular, kind of when you talked about the writing style, the old school writing style, that kind of matched up with that song, because I feel that song, it came up with just the bass, right, like the distorted bass, and then the guitar joined, but they were playing in unison. That kind of matched that thought of, maybe it was like a kind of drum and vocal led with the guitar kind of fitting in around it, even though it was so riff heavy. But yeah, that was a highlight, that track.
I did like I liked a lot of the, I don't know how to word it necessarily, like a lot of the choruses from, it was almost like some of their really early work where it's like so sketchy and it's so driven by the energy that they've got, and like one thing that actually in the early work we have like the odd time signatures and stuff, like where so you're not quite settling in the groove and you're like bam 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 bam, and you got to have that second where you catch back up to the beat again. There was one section, I only counted it properly today. Yeah, the end of Ohms, right to the end of the album, they have a 7/4 groove for like 4 bars, and it's fucking sick. And I wish there was more stuff like that on the album, and less big choruses with slow chords.
There were quite a lot of tempo changes, I think. Like that track, and I'm trying to think. Might have been Era, I don't know, but there were like I'd say probably 3 or 4 tracks that had kind of the ending section was in a different tempo, which I thought was good, but kind of it could get repetitive having that as like a musical idea.
The kind of the idea I kept coming back to as listening to it as a whole is how much has the listener had to earn those moments. So like the huge choruses and stuff, they work really, really well, and Deftones are amazing at composing them. But on tracks like, I'm just trying to scroll through, stuff like, so Radiant City, where you have that, like, I couldn't tell if it was chromatic from listening today or not, but just the really small steps, like the down, then it comes out with that massive held chord for the chorus. You've earned that by having the really, really tremolo picked, like the fast stuttery stuff before it, and you've come from that really small, like hard compressed space, and it's opened up into this massive chorus. But there were other songs, like Urantia, however you're meant to pronounce that,
Urantia, whatever, yeah.
Where like they had moments that I really, really liked. The intro and the drum sound for the intro, I loved it. But then they did lots of stuff like they had a nice like pull off groove that was almost like a dime bag kind of down sort of stuff. I made it sound really country then. That but heavy. But it was just nowhere near as prominent as it would have been on Diamond Eyes or Koi, and I think that was to make space for the more ambient stuff. And because the track was generally more like that, I felt that I hadn't earned the big chorus of held chords and like dropping vocal lines and stuff, rather than the tracks that were more in your face.
Yeah, actually, Urantia was my favorite song on the album, because I think Urantia captured like the essence of what they were going for with this album, in that I found it to be the most balanced. I think everybody gets a chance to shine. There's a few really good riffs from the guitars. Frank Delgado isn't sleeping. There's some great atmospheric moments coming from the effects. The drums, like you said, have a really good sound towards the end. I think, this is one of the songs. This and Era and Radiant City, to me, are where Abe Cunningham's drums really shine on this album.
I think we got a shout out in general. I think one of their biggest strengths is the production, and how I'd probably say through their career they've always had every instrument sit in its own place, especially with when you're talking about like writing with like 7 strings, 8 strings. You mentioned before doing this, Dennis, about you even utilizing a 9-string guitar, which I think I heard that on one track, but I can't remember the name of it. But
I was listening out for it. Yeah, it didn't seem to have as much of an impact as I was expecting it to. I wanted the from it.
Yeah, there was one track where it definitely.
Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
I wanted like Fear Factory.
But I guess the good thing is, like, throughout, I wouldn't say the guitar was ever fighting the bass. The drum still had its space. Everything was just produced so cleanly without being like overproduced, which I think is one of the biggest kind of like boons for them as a band. So their production, their engineering, I think is like top tier for like kind of mainstream like heavy rock or metal.
I don't know if they've worked with them before, but they've got they had Terry Date doing production and mixing for the album. They've also named themselves as production, so the whole of Deftones works on it, presumably because they're quite that was new metal sort of vibes anyway, but I assume they're all quite technically proficient, being in a band with like those kind of keyboards and ambient elements all the time anyway. But they've also had mastering and a mastering assistant.
Yeah, so I think when you view credits and you see like production being assigned, it can often be misleading, because production could just mean the musical direction without any of the technical aspect. So it might be like if they're listed as production, they just had a heavy hand in like the creative control, versus like say maybe their first albums, if they weren't credited as a producer, they'd have someone that was steering or shaping their ideas, without it necessarily being like a technically focused thing as you would get with like a like mixing, mastering, all that. It's always like a grey area when you see kind of labels like, oh, they produce this. It doesn't really, to me, it doesn't always paint the picture of what they actually did in the studio.
from listening to interviews with the band, it sounds like from correct me if I'm wrong, but did they self-produce either the last album or the one before that? And they haven't worked with Terry Date for a while. I think they worked with Terry Date for their self-titled album, and they may have worked with him for White Pony, but they haven't worked with him for quite a long time, and they decided to bring him back in.
I'm having a look. He's got a big discography of production work. Pantera, Soundgarden.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But yeah, I don't think they've touched on him. They've come back to him for a while, but apparently they were still friends. They were still talking. It's not like they fell out or anything. But they did definitely take on the production work themselves. And Chino Marino was saying that was a bit too much. They'd bitten off a bit too more than they could chew. And
on the previous albums.
Yeah. Where they were getting more involved with the production side.
Yeah. I think you can hear it, because I would say, this album is like, it sounded the most like old Deftones to me in a long while. Like when you're talking about like White Pony, especially I'll just say it now. My favorite track was Era. I fucking love that, and that just captured White Pony, Around the Fur type Deftones. That song became an instant classic for me, along with all of their older tracks. And there was quite a lot of tracks on the album that I thought sounded old style Deftones, while still having the kind of newer elements in terms of kind of the extended range, like guitar and stuff.
It's quite interesting to pick up Around the Fur as well, because they haven't strayed too much from this, but this is their first 10-track album since Around the Fur, I think. I think all the other ones have had 11 plus, and more. The closer you get to now, generally, the more tracks they've had, which I don't think has always worked in their favor.
But did you guys get the perception that the album was the right length of time, or did it feel like a long 10-track album or a short 10-track album? Because even though for me, even though it's 10 tracks, that's like the perfect window for me, I would say, it did feel a little bit drawn out. Not in a necessarily bad way, but it felt longer to me. I think maybe part of that came from the fact that there were lots of chops and changes, and like you said, instrumental breaks and ambient sections that kind of elongated it. So that there were sections where the song would change near the end, and that could have effectively been an interlude track separately, which made the album seem longer than it was.
That's
because I think it's only 45 minutes.
Would you have preferred the intro outro kind of ambient filler spaces that they created? Would you have preferred those to be separate tracks by themselves, or did you like the way they did it, where they had some kind of influence on the track because they were stuck at the end or the beginning of it?
Yeah, I didn't mind having it be part of the track, because I would generally say if I'm going to listen to it, I'm going to listen to it as a whole album, so it's just in the background. I'm not focused on what the track name is or whatever. But I can see how it'd be annoying for someone that might want to pick out tracks and just put them in like a playlist or something. But personally, I don't mind. I like consuming an album as an album most of the time. So
I don't really like the whole splitting sections and adding little skits. I mean, Tool do that a lot. Like they'll have like a 1 or 2 minute atmospheric section in between songs. I do like how the atmospheric sections do tend to be sort of at the end or at the beginning, so it sounds as though the songs are blending together.
Yeah, I like that they work. I like the grand picture of it as an album where they flow from track to track. I'm not sure, because on previous albums they've maybe had a bit of this style and then also a complete track that's just a transition. But yeah, that was just something that stood out to me and wondered.
I think something that was missing was like a kind of from a hard-hitting track or a hard-hitting ending of a track into a hard-hitting track to the next, because I found sometimes the kind of ambient interludes in the middle kind of ruined the energy that I gained from listening to a track. It's not something that I have a problem with on every album, but I found in this it was kind of like, okay, I'd get psyched when I heard a track like I'm trying to get back to it.
Ian City was heavy.
I'm trying to think. There was a combination of two tracks where it was like a lot of ambient at the end and then a lot of ambient at the beginning. It kind of ruined my energy. I think it was Pompeii, which I wasn't that hot on in anyway. Into the Link is Dead, and that kind of, I don't know. At that point, I was really not fussed. It brought itself back up because again, the Link is Dead was one of my favorite tracks, but I felt like it took too long to get going, and I wasn't, when I was listening to it, I was just ready to kind of, headbang and just get, kind of zone in. But it kind of took me out of it for a little while. There were only a few times where that happened, but there's a bit of that can be trimmed.
There's some dips in the track list, I think.
Mm. Did you guys think Genesis was a good start?
So, I've got a kind of beginning, middle, and end to my relationship with this album at this point. No doubt will change over time as well. But I think I'm going to go back to older albums sooner than I'm going to pick this one up again, generally. But my first listen to it, I was fucking hyped. I thought Genesis was a sick.
Started
intro.
off really well.
I was well up for that kind of the slowness, the ambience it created, the kind of techie digital vibe that it had.
It's probably one of the best vocal performances as well, I thought, because it started off with like the heavy instrumentation and it had Chino doing a very ethereal kind of soaked in reverb vocal, which I think is the perfect balance for them. Like I brought it up briefly earlier, but yeah, again, one of my like biggest drawbacks is when say they'd have like a chorus or a pre-chorus and it would be heavy or leading something heavy and Chino would match them with a heavy vocal. But I feel like when he does his really kind of almost like shouty vocal, it just doesn't have the energy. I feel like he may have had on older albums. I found like he should stick to kind of almost like kind of using his voice as another instrument and kind of blending in the background. I find like he's a great singer when he's kind of just like his vocals are just soaked in reverb and he's just kind of like wailing or whatever. But when he tries to force it and kind of almost scream, I find that's when it draws back. I found that track Genesis was great because it was heavy instrumentation, but a chilled kind of vocal style. That's just what I wanted personally.
That was another really, really good point about Radiant City, because they had that. It was almost like 2 lines on each style or something, swapping between distorted vocals and then like kind of cleaner guitars, and then swapping it over again back into a riff on the guitar, and the vocals were sparser and way cleaner, like that. Really kind of like you're changing the timbre of the song as a whole. You're giving it a new energy, but you're not detracting from it. Whereas a lot of the time when they dropped into the full like synth heavy parts of it and lost the guitar completely, for me that was like the energy just went whoom, all the way down. But they achieved the same effect by just kind of swapping the parts over.
Yeah, I think it's just good when they put the kind of contrast at the same time. So you've got a heavy element with a light element at the same time. I think we're probably all on the same page, where if it goes from full heavy to full light, it didn't work that well on this album.
Yeah. Shall we talk about tracks individually then, as we kind of started with?
Yeah, should we
go for it?
Dennis, have you got any Genesis thoughts?
Well, it's a good opening. I really liked the atmospheric beginning, and at first I wasn't too hyped about the main riff, but probably because it's the first track and I've heard it more than all the other ones, it is the one thing that sort of sticks out in my memory when I think back to the album.
Really?
What were you expecting? Like, say when you first listened to it, because I thought it like set the tone perfectly and kind of was almost like a microcosm for how the rest of the album ended up being.
It is a good start. I will say though that I like the intro more than I like the song. That was the impression that I really like. I really like the intro, and then the song is just kind of dips a little bit.
I think personally, I wouldn't put it as one of my favorite tracks, but I think I like part of the reason why I liked it a lot, especially as an intro, is like I said, it set the tone. And the second track, Ceremony, was one of my least favorites. So when I go back to the album, I have the kind of, and the half a dozen times that I've listened to it, I have the great start compared to like the weaker second track that kind of makes them stand out. Like, my favorite track, or the track I like, becomes even better, and the track I dislike becomes even worse.
I have 3 notes for Ceremony, and one of them is that the harmony
weakest
on the word illusion reminded me of Aerosmith Crazy. I was not sold on that at all.
Yeah. I got
Ceremony either.
Yeah. I mean, we should probably just go track by track and then go to our favorites at this point. So we all weren't fussed on Ceremony, then I take it.
Before we leave Genesis though, I'd one final thing, because you've just brought it up here, and it ends really, really heavily after that really ambient beginning, and that was really good. And it, like, as an album starter, sick. It reminded me a little bit of I know a lot of albums do this, but it reminded me a little bit of my first listen to Malibu, and that kind of the way it all builds up, and it's got all the elements that come back later in the album. I would have liked Genesis to be heavier throughout, but like as we go on, that becomes like a kind of theme of the album, is that I would just like it to be heavier throughout.
Yeah, like you said, it doesn't really utilize that 9-string as much. I mean, I think you guys are probably know better than I do, because you've actually worked at tuning, getting a guitar to do the sound that you want. But you could have probably got the same tune with just detuning, drop tuning your guitar to drop F, and just using heavier strings.
I don't think there was a 9-string on it. Like, listening to it, kind of the riff in it sounds like a 7. It sounds like a B. Sorry for all non-guitar players out there, but it sounds like a 7-string riff.
Yeah, I think either they didn't utilize it as much as they could, or it's just not that impactful for this style of music.
Should we move on then down the track list?
Yeah. All right. Ceremony. Dennis, go.
Ceremony was largely uneventful for me. It was a stopgap to Urantia, really, for me.
Yeah. I'm totally with you. Yep. Like bottom 3 tracks, I would say I'd put it.
This track made me scared for the rest of the album, because I love the gritty, riffy early Deftones. I also love the newer, coy, Diamond Eyes style groove, like flowy Deftones. This made me worried because there was not really any groove in it.
Yeah.
They had a lot of ambience in the middle of the track, which kind of just killed the energy that you'd got coming out of Genesis. Yeah. I was not pleased.
I think as well it had a very straightforward, strong song structure compared to the others. So, like I said, I know while we had our gripes with some of the ambient bits, definitely like tracks where it just had like other tracks with like tempo changes kind of really stood out upon repeated listens. But this, it was just a by the numbers kind of, the songwriting was by the numbers, I would say, and the vocal melodies weren't interesting. Chino's melodies weren't anything that grabbed me upon repeated listens.
It's really unfortunate, like you say, Jack. It's really unfortunate that they come out of such a punchy intro to this.
Yeah. Just
you kind of almost want like a mellow track and then to go to a heavier track instead of setting the bar really high and then bringing you back down.
Yeah, it could have done a lot more towards the middle if they'd kind of kept that high off Genesis and then dipped into the middle of the album, maybe. But look.
Okay. Should we move on?
All right, Dennis. convince me that Urantia is a good song because it's got good moments.
Oh, did you not like it?
It was.
Dude, that intro riff.
Again, my notes begin all caps. The trem-picked guitars, the ambient drum sound on intro.
Yeah, because see that was another thing that confused me. Right, you went from Genesis being like moody and then heavy and then great, and then you had Ceremony, which brought me right down, and then this took me back up again.
Yeah,
I'm not sure
it kind of had an
up.
Yeah, I mean it was mellower.
Yeah,
I kind of got
energy.
Did you guys get a Led Zeppelin vibe as well? Because listening to it, it sounded like Led Zeppelin in 2020.
There was a song on the album where I noticed one moment they had a really just bluesy drop into something. I was on the final track. I was thinking if you sped up, it was just like a sort of stuff, and it just really subtly thrown in there before a chorus or something. I was thinking if you sped that up and repeated it, that's you got Black Keys. So
there were a few band comparisons that I got from this album that I'll get into when we get to the tracks, but
Well, Urantia, I will say, like I said before, it's the most balanced. It's the best chance that they all get to showcase themselves. That's why I would pick it as it's my favorite track on the album. Like all the other,
you're out of your mind.
I think. Well, all the other tracks have bits, but like I guess it's kind of like it's not like the best track on the album, but it gives you it's the most hearty meal.
Yeah, you're right. It ticks all the boxes, I would say, like in terms of the guitar's good, the other instruments good, the vocals didn't lack, but it didn't reach the heights of a few of the other tracks for me. Yeah, but I understand what you're saying in terms of it represents the album well.
Yeah. One thing I was really paying attention to when I was listening to this album is Abe Cunningham and the drums, because I think the drums have been a centerpiece really for the Deftones. So I would want Abe to bring his A game. And there are some tracks where maybe it's because of the way it was mixed or just the writing itself that he just didn't really get a chance to show his best. Whereas this is one. There are a few tracks on here. Yeah, Urantia, Error, Spell of Mathematics, that little section at the end, where he really gets to shine.
So I say we're generally positive on the track. Well, Dennis obviously being large, very positive.
Yeah.
Brought the album back at least from track 2.
I would probably put it in my bottom 5.
Damn!
Album. Probably. I've not properly thought about that, so that's just a number I've settled on.
Yeah.
But it wasn't something that stuck out to you.
Yeah.
I mean, to be fair, I think that's poor wording, because if we're talking about a 10-track album, bottom 5 could mean track 6, which is like mid-tier.
Yeah.
So I wouldn't take your words as seriously unless you were to say bottom 3.
Yeah, I was like, it's not the worst. It's not bottom 3, but it's probably not I would say top 5 would be. I could pick 5 tracks that I highly rated from the album.
Yeah, so I could put it mid-table.
I also think that the fact it comes before Error and Spell of Mathematics probably makes it seem less of an impactful track and less it's less standout to me, because by anything I like about that, I feel like Error and Spell of Mathematics probably do better for me.
But that's another thing as well of why I like this album, in that, Ceremony is a bit of a lull. This is like the beginning of an upwards trajectory for the album.
Probably the best consistent run, I would say tracks 3 to 5 is when the album was firing on all cylinders. And I agree with Dennis, it was the start of that uptick. Should we go on to Error? I mean, I'm really keen as it's my favorite track by far.
Yeah.
Like to me, again, like I said earlier, this is just like classic Deftones. You know, if I was making a Deftones playlist, you know, from all their albums, it would go straight in there. Just the the riff, it's so good, and Chino nailed it. Like I said, his vocals on this track was reminiscent of early albums. You know, while I thought he was like weak at points, this just nailed it. So, what do you guys think of Error?
I thought the drums are really, really good. That's part of the beginning and the end. The drums are really good, and it played really well with the riff. And I didn't listen to Chino as much. I guess I'm not as big a fan of his vocals because I find it really, really hard to discern words that he's saying. So I guess I have to read the lyric sheet.
He's not. Yeah, I mean, I wasn't really focused on any lyrics. I'm purely going from the aspect of his melodies, how strong his vocals sounded, and I would say in general, I'm not that hot on him as a metal vocalist in general. But I would say this track was a perfect example of him, kind of given one of the better performances that I think he could do.
Actually, I listened to another interview with Chino where he has a really interesting writing style where when he writes, the prominent thing for him is how the vocals, like the rhythm of it and how it sounds, and the lyrics come later. So he's playing his voice almost like an instrument, which is like an interesting way of writing.
Yeah, I got that a lot on Genesis, just to go back to it, but yeah. Jack, what was your thoughts on Error?
So my first note is the groove is back.
Yeah.
Potentially the best song on the album, depending what day it is, how I'm feeling.
Yeah, sick.
Definitely a top 3 track for me.
Yeah.
Same.
And the tempo change at the end, I'm just kind of skipping through it again, like where it has the kind of swingy half at the end before it kind of goes back into the chorus. Just perfect.
This is one of the examples, like Dennis was talking about earlier. This is one of the examples where they drop for a middle 8, but they don't lose everything that they spent the whole first half of the song building up to, because they keep the drums, like you're saying, they keep the drums proper old school Deftones, blending those kind of different styles together underneath the heaviness, and just that and that by itself, even though they're like, you've got really simplistic guitar on top of it, that drum pattern keeps the energy and the interest that you've had for the whole first bit of the track, so that when you get back into it, you're ready. And you haven't had
because the drums don't really change until the whole tempo changes, right? So no, I agree with you, because the drums were like constant, the energy levels just up there the whole time, and that did allow the vocals, the other instruments to kind of dip in and out. Obviously, verses, guitars dipped out, and it was just with loads of layered vocals to fill those like frequencies. But drums as a constant.
The second verse with the really like discordant guitars being mixed way more prominently than they have been up to this point on the album, that was really refreshing as well. That's another, they're going back to some old school stuff that they've done before, hadn't really cropped up on this album until Error. That was really welcome.
It just sounded fresh. It sounded like they were a band, not to say that they sound like they're fucking like one foot in a grave as a band, but it sounded like a younger version of themselves for me. Everyone had like high energy.
Which is sort of props, hats off to the Deftones, because they have been in the business for over 20 years now. So it's good for them it's refreshing for them to be not resting on their laurels at all, and still pushing, whether or not they use 9-string guitars, that's still like, they're thinking like, we're not, let's try something new. Let's change things up.
Let's go Spell of Mathematics then.
Really, this is my least favorite song on the album.
What the hell?
Okay.
What the hell, dude?
Defend your position.
I found it to be largely uneventful, except for the last third. I really, really liked the last third. It was really atmospheric.
That's my least favorite part. Go on.
Fair play.
The main riff though, dude, that was so heavy, man.
Dude, the ambient end of Era into the drop into Spell of Mathematics. I've got a couple of tracks on this album I've made a unique phrase that I'm going to use from now on because it just fits. Was instant head bobber. The first time I heard that, I was out in public. The first time I heard that, with my headphones, just I was chilling with the ambience. The beat drops in. I'm just there going, catch myself going, hey.
Like Dennis, you need to turn this track up right to a level where you're comfortable, like the max level that you're comfortable without it hurting your ears, and then turn it up a few more numbers, and then you will appreciate the track. Yeah,
Turn it to 11.
Yeah. You find that 11, man. Like this track playing it loud when you're just zoned out, it was like an experience, a spiritual experience.
I guess my main gripe is the groove of it. It just doesn't sit well with me at all. I just don't like the main groove.
You're not talking about the verse where it kind of mellows out. You're talking about like generally how it starts.
Yeah. Well, how it starts and how it sort of keeps carrying on and keeps coming back to that first sort of main idea. It just didn't really sit well with me. And there's a few songs on here where the groove, the beats that it hits, just doesn't sit that well with me. I don't know.
Again, for me, listening back to it briefly, like the kind of latter half where it's literally just bass and drums and like Chino's like wailing. That's like one of the peaks of the album for me. And you're talking about like you're talking about like a groove that doesn't resonate. I would probably say that exemplifies like probably the best groove on the album. You know, the track as a whole isn't my favorite. I'd probably give that to Error, but I'd probably say that groove is, one of the best.
Someone's with me on that last third.
Yeah, I'm quite surprised. I mean, this is definitely in my top 3.
Okay, let's talk about the end then. So they have all of this rock and distortion build up and all this like energy pumped into the track. They've got an ambient midsection, which by this point in the album I'm getting kind of like used to, This is almost like it's not shocking anymore. It's I've grown to accept it, but it's starting to wear a little bit.
It's the best for me. It's the best application of that change.
I would probably say so as well, because it cuts immediately like straight back to heavy stuff.
Yeah,
and the drums are going like full tilt, crash cymbals on every crotchet sort of stuff. Yeah,
it's like a brief reprieve from like the heaviness, like the kind of madness that surrounds like the main riff. And again, like the track we were just saying, Error, the drums still lead it in terms of you haven't lost all your energy, or I didn't at least.
Yeah.
Actually, that's another thing I don't like about this song. You keep mentioning this harsh changes that they have, and I didn't really actually notice that as much listening to the album. But I think you're right. It is the most pronounced, or this is the point where it starts to get grating.
Then you have that like. I don't mean this in a negative way, just as a musical term. That droning outro where everything's kind of fading out on top of what is admittedly a really fucking dank bass riff, just rocking between the root changes with a few notes in between.
With
the bit that's like that bit with the soaring vocal. Dude, that is so good. I
could listen to that all day.
Yeah.
That is comfort food for my ears.
But then the way it drops away and it almost trips up into You guys have been saying it Pompeii. Have I misread it as Pompeii?
I assumed it was Pompeii, like the place. I mean, it does, phonetically it's Pompeii, right? But I'm sure it's Pompeii. The was he with the volcano, right? Should make.
Do we look Yeah, is that the proper spelling? And every time I've seen it, it's been done.
I think it is.
I've seen it as Pompeii everywhere.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. So
you uncultured swines.
It could be that Spanish J, so it could be Pompeii.
Pompeii.
Let's go with Pompeii, man. It's Pompeii.
Yeah, so yeah, for me, they ride in off error on this massive high. Can keep it going all the way through. Something at the end, it's like they run into a wall and they crash into this like ambient space. They fall over again and they're suddenly in a fairground with some weird haunted house chords at the start of Pompeii.
I think that this was a chance for Frank Delgado to have something to do.
Yeah, so my take, just to start this one off, worst track on the album. Hands down, the vocals didn't fit.
Ceremony.
Yes, I'd probably say Ceremony is second worst. This is the worst. Like, the vocals were completely mismatched. The vocals sounded like they were from a different song. They like copied and pasted the wrong stems and been like, safe, right? Let's save this and get it out. Like, it was really bad. And again, coming off, what was it? Urantia era spell of mathematics. I was on such a high into this.
Yeah,
it was just disjointed. I found the instrumentation didn't fit together. The vocals was almost like atonal at points. A real letdown.
The heaviness of the guitars was all right. I liked how heavy the guitars were in this. It's that mellow, heavy sound.
But again, I mean, that was done so much better on Era. It kind of felt like someone had just slowed down kind of the the guitar line from Era.
Yeah, I see what you mean. So
and it had no groove. Like, say, when you're comparing it to the grooves, I know Dennis, you didn't like mathematics that well, but comparing it to the grooves on the previous two tracks, it had even though it was heavy at points, I wasn't banging my head. I wasn't zoned out. It was just it was dirge-like.
From an album point of view, and I think that's one sort of weak point of this album, in that it doesn't have a trajectory really. It is all over the place.
Yeah,
I think that's one of the main things this track suffers from for me, is they have two of the kind of dynamically lesser sections, but they're so middle ground.
Yeah,
like after the kind of the balls to the wall previous couple of tracks, the like really good use of sections like this,
dynamics and tempo changes.
I wouldn't have actually been upset if there's one that comes at 2 minutes 27, 2:30, around there. I wouldn't have been mad if the kind of halftime sort of stuff they had there just wasn't there. I wouldn't have minded if it was a complete step down to completely reset the album, because they kind of do that again at the end, where they have the even spacier, more effect-driven bit right at the end, like 3 minutes 45, 3:50, something like that. Is a kind of, they go from like song ends, they have a like kind of a sound walk for a second, then they go into like a complete digital space palette cleanser or something like that for the rest of the album.
Right, because this had the ambient section, right? The long ambient section. Yeah. I
wouldn't have minded if this track, if it had started off for the heavy, so it matches mathematics better, and then drops into what it ends up as. I feel it would have served a better purpose.
Well, this is why you made a very good point earlier about like kind of earning it. It didn't, because it was so middle of the road and it kind of compressed the dynamics of the previous tracks. It didn't earn that ambience. yeah, if it was one of those previous tracks that was just so like, yeah, balls to the wall, and then you had that reset, great. But this track, it was just kind of like, the start of this track already reset me, and my mood went down like with Ceremony, and then went down even further when it went to the ambience. So yeah, it was a big low, a big low.
Yeah,
does anyone have a defense?
No, I think this should have maybe been at the end. You could have maybe put Ohms in the middle here, put the single in the middle here.
In the bin, man. In the fucking bin. This did not deserve to be on the album. Yeah. Pompeii. Chill. No. We need to move on from Pompeii. Just as I will now skip it with every listen to the album.
So the link is dead. I'm in my perfect version of this album. Pompeii is a minute long, and it's just the end.
Just the interlude, yeah. I would have been happy with that.
As a complete interlude, palate cleanser. Then we start the second half of the album. Ish. Link is dead.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah, up there for me. One of the best. For me, again, I'm gonna make one of my biggest band comparisons. Listening to this, so it sounded so much like a band that I love, and I wonder if you guys got the same thing. It kind of not as heavy and not as crazy, but it had a Dillinger Escape Plan vibe. This track,
I can hear that.
Kind of the guitar octaves that are kind of all over the place. Nailed it, and the drums are really kind of jittery and off kilter. Like, yeah, one of the highlights for me. Great vocals. Yeah, again, like I said, I've had my qualms with Chino's kind of like screen vocals, but on this he kind of nailed it, because he wasn't kind of like whining. It was just. I think it's probably one of the few tracks where he was, genuinely like screaming. Not having a melody, just screaming over these really kind of odd octave chords, and yeah, it was great.
I think that because it's built on that kind of riff as well. For me, like this was one of the best. It's not probably not top 3 for me, but this was one of the tracks that felt the best to me. It was like we were saying,
very well written.
A new Deftones. Yeah. This was almost like coming home to an old Deftones.
Yeah,
because that heavy groove based, the riff based music, the vocal work on top of it. Like, he's got the space to work around the guitars. The drums are just that they've been Deftone drums for 20 years now, however long it's been going.
I could listen to the main octave riff that keeps layering. I could just listen to that endlessly. Guitar wise, from my guitar bias, one of the not complex, really simple, but just one of the best kind of written guitar ideas.
That is, I've literally was about to say, I've had this prompted a question for me. So this track for me stood out from the album because it's a simple idea that they absolutely nailed.
Yes.
And for me had a much bigger payoff than a lot of the other tracks where they've tried to have 8 different ideas and find a place for them all to go and find a way to settle it into the track.
You're right. And again, at the end, it goes crazy, right? Everything, the instrumentation builds up, and again, it's earned that. It's earned that by having that simple idea that kind of gets you locked in, and then it takes you to another place. Again, just revisiting it, that end bit, one of my favorite parts of the entire album.
I really wish
just with the guitar line again going up and up and up.
I really wish I had more time to sit with this album, because after Pompeii, my brain just turned off until Radiant City, really.
Because Mandy did several tracks to recover. That's crazy.
Because they kind of go into each other, right? You've got this long sort of ambient section at the back of Pompeii, and then you've got this ambient section going into The Link is Dead, and that kind of flattened the song for me. But if I had more time to sit with the album, what sometimes I do is those dead songs, I'll just filter them out, so I'll just skip them, and then the gems come out that way. But I think Pompeii really sort of overshadowed this song for me, and it's not until Radiant City that I really kick back in and start liking the album again.
Yeah, it does feel like, for me, the quality of the album's tracks is literally up and down almost with like every 2 tracks or whatever, which I don't know. That's probably better than having like a really good start and then a bad end, or vice versa. It's good to have like constant goodness throughout, but it definitely, yeah, kind of my mood was all over the place.
Okay. Speaking of mood, Radiant City, for me, best track on the album. It's got, I mean, I've got 3 lines of notes here in all caps, so it tells you how much I was reacting from it from the get-go. But the bass kind of fills out that tone, which is what...
Very good bass tone, yeah.
I don't know if that's because I knew that they'd used heavier guitars or something, but that is generally something I'd expect from Deftones anyway. I wanted that heavy, low kind of stuff going on way more in the album. And it finally was this track 8. Finally, I got that. And it's right from the off as well. And then the drums come in, and then you get the guitar doing those small incremental steps down to start into it. Then the high pace guitar riff after that as well. Just the energy straight from the off, especially after Pompeii. And then like my brain's almost doing this. It's happening again.
You're waiting for it.
I had Genesis, then I went to Ceremony, then Urantia, Error, Spell of Mathematics. I'm building it back up again. Then they've dropped me again with Pompeii. Link is Dead is all right. Radiant City, my brain just it knows this cycle.
I had my opinion changed across like continuing listens. So I think I had very similar thoughts to you upon first or second listen, in terms of it stuck out and instantly shot up to being like one of my favorites. I was looking for something that was really kind of heavy. Again, from those previous tracks, I was like, let's take it further. On the last few listens, kind of dipped a little to maybe be a mid-tier track for me, because I found it didn't have enough it didn't have enough in it to keep me interested. Like, especially when I'm comparing it to what we just talked about. Was it the Link is Dead or the Spell of Mathematics? You had on those tracks you had a much better variation between dynamics, tempo changes, that are the kind of things where I listen and I hear new things each time. With this, it's great from the off, but it's kind of like once I've heard it, I know what it is, so to speak. And that doesn't make it a bad track now. It's just not one I'm going to come back and rediscover. I feel like I've heard it, I've enjoyed it. I'd move on in terms of the track list. But good riff. It fit its piece. I think maybe it could have been placed differently in the track list. I might have preferred it if it was. It felt weird being in the middle late section. It stands out like a single to me. I don't actually know if they've released singles or what singles they are, but it seems like a good single track.
That's what I was going to ask.
Sorry, it to me seems like it's kind of a packaged song. Like I say, the kind of it being a single and stuff like that. It's got that riff intro, back riff for the outro. It stops instantly. It feels like putting this together as a song. Like what track was it earlier when we were saying it was almost a microcosm of the album? Maybe like Genesis. Maybe what you're saying that.
I think it was. I said that about Genesis. I think that's why I thought that was a good introduction, because it kind of summed out what the album's going to sound like.
Yeah,
I said that about Urantia. I think you may have said that about The Link is Dead.
Okay.
Yeah.
I guess probably okay. So we have the same thoughts, but about different tracks.
This was that for me.
Yeah.
But like not necessarily the album that I got, but the album I expected before I'd listened to it. And because it
wasn't representative of the album.
No. But it was. No. This was my mentality going in, which is probably why it resonated with me so much from the beginning.
Yeah, you're looking for something, and this fitted.
Yeah. Because that for me, what I really like about the Deftones is how they manage space. So it's like we were talking about earlier with the different vocal styles and having that juxtaposition. That's in this track. Having the really fast, riffy stuff that's grindy and it's hard, and then you burst out into wide open spaces. That's in this track. The kind of funky, syncopated, but really reverberant drum sound and like style that's all over this track. Heavy riffs from the off that come back at the end, and they're like, yeah, this is like what I expected for the whole album. But I think they nail it. I think they're like that. I personally don't think there's anything wrong with this track.
I think they do nail it, but that's also why I think this should have been one of the singles.
Yeah.
Do we know?
Because it hits.
I think I would have liked it at the start or the end.
Genesis and Ohms were the singles of this album.
Genesis was a single.
It's quite surprising. Yeah.
It was the second single as well.
Mm-hmm.
That is very surprising.
What's more surprising is the title track as a single. That would be the last track I would have put as a single. Because I found the title track. We'll get onto it, but the title track was one of the least representative of the album in terms of songs. But we'll get to that in a second.
Okay.
Yeah. If you take the title track, that single as this is what the album's going to be like, and then you listen to the album, you'll be very surprised.
Yeah, you'd be shocked if you liked that. You'd be disappointed, I think. But
they did the pop rock band who's having arguments with their management deal, where you release the poppy single with the big chorus, and then you on the album get to do what you actually wanted to do all along. Classic throwback.
Yeah.
Okay.
I mean, just to summarize, I mean, we should probably move on to the next one. But I'd say it's good, but it didn't have the replay factor as some of the other tracks for me.
I think I think Radiant City will sit better in playlists of Deftone tracks further down the line because of that close-endedness of it, and because it's I think it's a better standalone track than a lot of the ones on the album.
I do agree with you, Jack, in that the energy is great, but this started off as one of my favorite songs, but I don't know, I guess it's one of those that it's an obvious favorite song because it starts off with such high energy.
But then after Deftones hipster, so fuck that.
Yeah, man, like the link is down all the way.
I liked it before they released the album, man.
Yeah. Oh, I love that track on first listen. Like now it's so pastiche.
Now everyone else has heard it.
Yeah. Well, it's kind of like, okay, to give you like an example of like a similar thing for me is like if you look at say Tool 10,000 Days and the pop, that is such an obvious like best song on the album, and that's like you're in. But then after you listen to the whole album
say
several times over, I saw that as like
Wings for Marie, bro.
But see, this is what I'm saying.
Okay,
that after a few listens, you're like, oh, actually, like this is probably one of not so much the weakest, but this probably isn't even in my top 3 within this album.
Yeah, I guess it's kind of like it would be like a track where it's like if you got like a really good AI and was like, okay, produce a Deftones song. It would give you that, like there wouldn't be the complexity or depth that you might get if you got the real humans to do it.
Yeah.
I sound like I'm shitting on this track. I'm really not. It would definitely be in the top half for me.
That's like amidst all of this lockdown stuff of can artists be replaced? Should they just go and work in cyber instead? And you're here going like, yeah, but I mean, they phoned it in with AI, didn't they?
It's put all their albums in a meat grinder.
I think I'm gonna. This wasn't my favorite. This wasn't. This is probably a bottom half.
I thought you said it was.
As well.
Or we moved on.
Huh?
We talking about Headless?
Yeah.
Oh, sorry. Okay, yeah.
Oh, have we moved on? I thought we were still talking about Radiant City. Okay.
Let's move on. Let's move on. Headless.
Sorry,
Headless.
My bad. Yeah.
We're all headless.
So this is probably mid-table, lower end maybe track for me.
Agreed.
Yeah.
The Siren build-up had nice elements, I thought. I liked the wide kind of sonic space they made. That was really interesting. But by this point, I'm so done with it. I'm so done with them creating a space and then it disappears. and then they create another space 2 minutes later, and then it disappears. If they'd had, like, I thought there were really strong ideas in this one. If they'd used that kind of siren sound from the very beginning as a repeated motif throughout the ambient sounds they'd had throughout the whole album, I would have loved that a lot more. I think it would have had much more of an impact for me.
Yeah, like something that's stitching the whole album together, keep like some central theme and idea that's keeping it together.
Yeah, just playing with like the different ideas you can come up with the same, like they've been given a brief to include certain elements, and they're playing riffs on that theme and variation with it, kind of sort of stuff. I did like a lot of the rhythm work in this track. I thought the play between the vocals and the guitars were good. They had a really dark sound for their verse, which I loved. I'm there all day, every day for the dark side of the Deftones. Never not going to be interesting to me. But then they also like it. I get what you're saying with the AI stuff, because it's going back to that idea of earning big sounds and earning these kind of releases from the tension. That bridge, the spacey, low energy bridge, why? The track was already pretty like low energy and dark and stuff. If anything, it needed bringing up for the middle eight. They should have like just gone completely apeshit with it and gone mental. Then brought it down after.
Yeah, I think structurally wise, it was one of the more bog standard ones, which is kind of a shame as you're getting to the end. Kind of feel like you want to like peak in intensity.
Yeah,
it just kind of felt like it was winding the album down.
Yeah, on future listens, after Radiant City, I'd pretty much tune out.
What? So from this onwards,
I can't let that go. But
Ohms is okay. It doesn't stick out to me though. We'll get to that.
So,
I mean, I don't personally have much to say about Headless, so I'm going to move on. It was one of the.
I would put Headless before Pompeii in my ideal album listing, if I'm not allowed to get rid of any tracks or anything like that.
Because... What do you mean put them ahead? As in weakest, yeah?
Or do you mean rearranging?
I mean like chronologically. If I were to reorder the album,
yeah.
Because that going into a completely ambient section, I feel would feel a lot better than coming out of Radiant City and then going into Ohms, because Ohms hits from the off, in my opinion. I don't know where Dennis is getting off with this, but the outro to Headless into the beginning of Ohms, I started bobbing my head in public again, mate. I was there. If I was in a car, I'd be fucking banging it.
I would tune out at this point in the album, because I would be so confident that on YouTube shuffles and just random shuffles on my music subscription thing, it will come up, and I will listen to Ohms enough times that I don't need to listen to it on the album. I've already taken in the ideas of the album at this point, and I'm not missing out by skipping Ohms.
I was going to say one final point on Headless. I'd probably say the best part of it for me was there was a kind of like keychain right at the end, which was really cool. There's some interesting vocal melodies there.
They had, I felt that swing out of Headless into Ohms was the strongest part of it.
Yeah,
I think
it ended well.
Listening to it again, I agree with you. It is a nice transition.
I feel like if Ohms had come at a different point in the album, Dennis, you wouldn't have felt that way. But I think one of the effects this album had on me is I'm slightly jaded by the time I get to Ohms.
Yeah.
It's a very odd placement for the way the title tracks sounded. Very odd placing near the end.
Yeah.
It's one of the strangest decisions, I would say, especially because it just yeah, it just doesn't sound like anything else. I mean, it's probably the only track I would say that had a consistent like major key feel, right? It kind of, even though it's heavy, it was kind of happy at the same time. It just stood out for me. If it, listening to it on its own in a vacuum, I'd say there's lots of positive things, but listening to it there, I'd probably say, yeah, it's not what I'm looking forward to.
Jumping off with it being at the end of the album as well, it's got, so far as I could hear, this was the first time I noticed a really high harmonic pace for Deftones. So like it had almost, I haven't noted the time down for it, unfortunately, but they had an almost kind of punk speed to the changing of chords. Instead of this kind of like
yeah, there was
landing on different tonics, but with filler in between. This was almost like like that made it sound kind of classical. It's not what I meant to do, but it was like really quick. This tonic, this tonic, this tonic, and it was fresh. And when I listened to it the first time. Because the first time, we'll talk about this in a later episode, but when I listen to albums the first time through, I like to keep myself completely isolated from any information about it while I'm listening. I just put it on, wait till it stops playing. So I did not expect this to be, because I hadn't counted the track list either before. So I did not expect this to be the final episode of the final track of the episode. Yeah.
You have a dog with long blonde hair.
Open doors.
Nice. It worked really well.
Thank you.
God damn it, Jack's household ruined the stream.
But yeah, I didn't expect this to be the end because it had so much energy. It was like, it felt like it was picking up again. Yeah. And they had, this is where that kind of, you can almost imagine bottomy 3-2-0 down out blues drop into the chorus was. They really like, it felt like something fresh happening. It felt like something changing about what had been happening over and over and over again, which was that kind of heaviness, ambience for the past 9 tracks.
I would say not only was it was weird placing. I find it was weird putting it on the album. I mean, I would probably say put myself in their shoes. I would kind of bank it as like a good track that could be on a different project with a whole different tone. A project that had a kind of
I would agree. Do you think that this track was either the first one written or the last one written, and do you think it was written by a different writing group? Because to me, this could have come out of the original writing duo, and then the rest of the album was what they built off this track, or they could have made the album and then they, in the process of doing that, the original writing duo came up with this song and they were like, cool, we'll add it on. So what do you think?
When you put it like that, it does kind of seem like there was different different writers or different people that were kind of spearheading it, but it almost kind of feels like potentially it might have been something where if there were different key writers that they kind of had to fight with the main writers of the rest of the album to get it included. It's almost like if you take member A and B really wanted this track, they've got to say let's put it on, and I could imagine like others being like this doesn't fit the tone at all. What's the most strange thing about it is that it's the title track as well. So I kind of feel like if it was on there somewhere, it would just had a different track name or whatever. It would be less relevant to what we're talking about than it having a title track. I kind of see albums that have title tracks. They kind of that's putting out a statement about the album. And this track, the way this track sounded, was somewhere completely different to everything else. So it just seems so odd that they gave this track the name with how it sounded. In the context, it's just weird to me.
So Radiant City would be a sick album name.
It would. I think this was probably the first song that they wrote, because I think what probably happened is they evolved their style as they were writing. and I don't know why they ended up giving this. So I saw another interview with Chino about how they come up with album tracks, and he said they write the songs and then they give them names at the end.
Yeah.
So these were just Project A, Project B, whatever, up until probably when the album was getting composed. So to give this, maybe they were thinking it's the first song we wrote. It's what kicked all this off. Let's give it that. Let's give it that title. The decision to put it at the end, I don't know. I very much agree with Jack in that. At this point, you're a little bit exhausted, and you don't want any more changes. You don't want to be taking on any more of a roller coaster of consistency. You just want something consistent, something hard hitting, something that will stick out.
Imagine how good, right? Imagine how good Spell of Mathematics would have been as the closer.
I was just about to say, imagine you scrap Ceremony, yeah? You go straight into Urantia. After Error, you do Link is Dead, Radiant City. Coming out of Radiant City, Ohms, into Mathematics.
Yeah. The other thing, the Link is Dead would also have been an awesome closer. Again, just with the build up to the most hype, like frenetic point, and then just cutting it like there. You know, either one of the tracks we mentioned, could have fit so well at the end. I always kind of feel like you need to leave on a high. You need to leave on either a high, in an album like this, this genre, leaving on a high in terms of being like the most intense or the least.
Yeah.
And again, the title track just sat in that middle point.
I think
again with weird kind of a weird choice of like melodies and rhythms.
I think the Spell of Mathematics would have been perfect because that end bit, the mellowness of it was kind of like on Good Kid, Mad City, the last track on that, "Sing About Me," I think it is, which is just so mellow, and it's almost.
Compton is the last track.
Is it? Oh yeah, it is. It is. Is that the bonus album or is that
no? It's the main. It's the main.
All right. Yeah.
Again. I mean, it's a weird choice for an end track.
Yeah.
Coming off "Sing About Me," but I know what you mean. Let's
imagine that "Sing About Me" is the last track. Yeah, that would be great because it's so long. It's like a 7-minute track, but at the same time, it's kind of like mellow and like almost like meditative and hypnotic.
Yeah. It's like they take you to this level, so you've earned your rest at the end. You've earned your. It's almost like if that track was at the end, it's kind of like if you're in the trance of kind of the kind of the auditory hallucination that they've given you, and then you're just kind of waking up as that track kind of fades out. That's what I would have envisioned if that track was the closer.
See, that feeling makes me want to listen to the album again because that feeling doesn't make me want to get out of the experience of the album.
Yeah, you want to go back to the heaviness. You want to go back to kind of the changes. Yeah. It's right. Ohms is not something that you don't finish Ohms and be the track and be like, right, let's play it again. You're just kind of like, it's quite jolting.
I think
very jarring.
As a whole track, I agree. I don't know where it fits. I think the end, I'm torn. The very end of the track, I'm torn because I think they worked hard to make it sound like the end of an album, but it definitely naturally doesn't because of that 7/4 section coming in and that kind of stumbling feel that it gives to the music, even though it does go back into straight 4/4 or whatever it is after that. It was so fresh after that, and it had such a I don't know how to describe it, but just like an ongoing feel to it. It was a really strange place to end, but they'd clearly designed it to be an end section with all the kind of production side of it.
it just kind of mirrors it mirrors like a like a chord progression that doesn't resolve on the one. Again, sorry to get really like theory intensive, but yeah, as you're kind of rounding things up, it's almost like that it's ended on a kind of a non-resolving chord.
Imperfect cadences.
Yeah, and obviously that's not necessarily a bad thing in the context of writing, but with this, it's kind of again something like one of the tracks you mentioned, Mathematics or something. It would have been that resolve. It would have been that tonic chord, which again, this is a song that summarizes the album, not Ohms, which sits so far outside of all the other tracks.
Okay, let's place the track. No, let's place the album on the Crash It to Goat scale, soon to be under review, and then we can go around and do some top 3 tracks from each of us, and maybe then chat about the other topic.
Yeah,
so we lay out the scaling.
So we've got.
Yeah, can you get the scale up?
It is up on the stream if you guys would like to. I'll send on WhatsApp a link.
Just.
Oh, let's say it out loud. It goes from Trash It, bottom level, chuck it in the bin. Stream It.
Trash!
Stream It, which is what I assume all of us did, which is give it a listen, give it a chance, you're losing nothing.
Yeah, stream it would be like, if you're a fan of the genre or style, it's worth one listen and go from there.
Yeah.
What we got next? Buy It?
It's a bit. Come on. WhatsApp sounds going off. Yeah, next is Buy It. Obviously, directly support the artist for doing it. It's worth it. Next is Bang It, which to me means not only have you bought it, but you're proud of it, you're showing it off. You're playing it high volume. You're showing people around you.
Right. It's something in constant rotation, right?
Yeah.
You're not gonna get rid of this album anytime soon. Yeah.
Top, where we've got to, the Goat.
Goat. Yeah.
Can be either for the artist, for the genre, for the era.
Yeah. I think it's going to be hard for albums to hit that mark for us, but
for sure.
We'll see.
Except for this one. No.
Oh, shocker. All those negative things I said? Bullshit.
Yeah, I've been lying the whole time. I loved Ceremony. Okay, I would probably, as much as this pains me to say about Deftones, in light of how I feel about the previous Deftones albums, this would probably settle on Stream It for me.
Is that 2 out of 5 that I'm hearing?
I mean, if you want to be, if I was attributing numbers to it, I would probably give it a 3. Yeah, I would say it was average, but I don't plan on buying this album. If I listen to it again, I will be streaming it.
Right. No, that's
so I
fair.
feel like I can't.
I'll just go. No, that's fair. I mean, I'm kind of almost like halfway between Stream It and Buy It. I think it depends on who you are as a listener. If you're not really into like rock or metal, but want something to try, I wouldn't. I would say Stream It. If you're interested, but I think to get full appreciation, you need to be a fan of Deftones or really into this genre to really be able to absorb it. It's not a good entry point, but it does a lot of things well. So I'm probably gonna say Buy It, but just because I feel like it deserves that 3 if we are going to go with a boring number scale. So I say Buy It with an asterisk.
That's a good way to set the precedent in the first episode.
Yeah. Yeah. Right, I'm about it. 2.5. Dennis?
I would say Stream It. It's got, the album itself as a whole has some really good sections that you can really get into. But you would have, in order for me to give it a Buy It, I would say Buy It if you're a Deftones fan.
Yeah. Agreed. Yeah.
Because it would, in terms of their catalog, it fits in. If you already like them, if you already like whatever their style is.
Yeah.
But I'm personally, I wasn't a big Deftones fanboy. I do like them quite a lot. They have some really good tracks, but I think some of their other albums are better efforts than this album, and I really didn't like how inconsistent the album is. So I'd say stream it, because there are some great gems in there. Spell of Mathematics, gorgeous little section at the end. Radiant City, so much energy. Urantia, I really liked the consistency and the band coming together as a whole. The drums throughout are great. If you're a big fan of Abe Cunningham, he shows up on this album. So yeah, I would say stream it.
If you
out of interest, very very briefly, not opening a discussion about other Deftones albums, just like as a, I don't know, maybe split the discography into thirds and say where you'd place it. Where would you put this album? Like top third, top quadrant, middle, top middle, bottom middle, worst?
I'd say middle.
I would say middle high. I'd still if someone came to me and was like, oh, I want to get into Deftones, was going to go back to White Pony, Diamond Eyes, maybe around the fur as my, say, top three. I'd maybe put this 4 or 5. It's going to be mid to mid high, but it wouldn't be my first recommendation. Yeah, it's going to be for someone who's already a fan.
Another thing to consider as well is it's brand new, so we'll see how it ages.
Yeah,
true. Okay,
cool. Where would you put it, Jack?
I would put it in the middle as well. I would probably not put it... I feel like I prefer White Pony, Diamond Eyes, Koi. I think it's pretty similar to Koi, actually, to be fair. I feel like it's almost slap bang in the middle or slightly under for me. It's not their worst, but it's not knocking on the door of their best.
Basically listen to Diamond Eyes if you haven't.
Yeah, Diamond Eyes, White Pony. Around the Fur's got amazing songs on it, but it doesn't work as well as a complete album.
Yeah.
But then they've never... We'll do a discography episode on them.
Yeah.
All right.
We need to do top 3 tracks. So if someone were just gonna
think of you guys start with the top 3 tracks. I'm gonna create the topic on the screen for people. Yeah.
Well, I'd probably say I'd go quick. I'd probably say top 2 tracks: Error, Spell of Mathematics, Link is Dead. All amongst the heavier tracks, but also a good range of dynamics. On all of them, when they kind of took things down, they brought it back up, and it felt like they earned that. So those would be the ones for me. So a pretty strong middle section. Shame for Pompeii, but
I agree with you in that the middle section is strong. So for me, it's Urantia number 1, Error number 2, and Radiant City number 3 for bringing it back up towards the end there.
Oh my god, it's made it all as one complete line. For me, the top 3 tracks, I would have to go with Radiant City, Spell of Mathematics, and Error, in probably no particular order.
Yeah, I didn't really order mine. I probably put Error as my number 1, but Spell and Link could depend on the day.
Yeah, depending on the day, Error would be definitely up there. It sounds like we've got
Was
a Venn diagram here of
Was Spell of Mathematics the only one we all shared?
Error, I think.
Three? Oh, you put Error up there as well, Dennis.
Definitely,
I thought you did.
Yeah.
Okay, well, it's going to be Error then as the consensus. Like, someone's going to listen to one track.
Was Error the only one we all picked?
I think so, yeah.
Yeah.
Because I went Urantia and Radiant City, and Hattie does not rate Radiant City.
No. Again, it's top 5. It might be 4 or 5, but it doesn't creep upon those tracks. I think that middle section. I think we're all in agreement. Pompeii aside, that middle section is when it peaks, and then there's some bits near the start and end that kind of can be iffy. Yeah,
you trash Pompeii right off the bat.
Right.
I mean,
Deftones.
I would, for like Urantia isn't as high a point for me as it is for you guys, but scrap Pompeii, and you've got 5 sick tracks back to back.
Yep. No, I'm with you. So from Urantia up till Radiant City, it's kind of consistent. Besides,
that is solid.
Yeah. No,
in fact,
completely
scrap
agree.
Ceremony, scrap Pompeii, Headless, put Ohms after Genesis, maybe.
Yeah.
Because Radiant ends with that bam, and it's done.
Yeah.
That's a sick album.
No, I'm with you. So if it was an EP minus Ceremony, Pompeii, and Headless, you'd have a fucking sick EP.
Yeah. There you go. We fixed Ohms. Okay. We're also going to talk about: is it better for a band? Quite fittingly, with Deftones being the album, is it better for a band / artist to pick a defining sound and refine it as they go through their careers, or seek to evolve and change things up with each new album?
Well, so I'm a big Rush fan. Huge Rush fan, and they did this to the extreme. There's a good 4 or 5 albums there which you can just skip. It just didn't work. But hats off to them. So between, I think it's Subdivisions is when it really starts to become synthy. And then they do basically just pop synth albums for 4 or 5 albums until the 90s kick in, and then it's the album with Show Don't Tell. Crap, I can't remember what the album is, but that comes back in, and boom, they are progressive again. They are they've got synths, but they've got those time signatures, the strange odd time signatures coming in. Great riff work, guitar solos coming in. A lot of focus on guitars and less focus on ambience, etc. So they decided to go a different way, and it really, really didn't work, to the point where even hardcore fans just throw away 3 or 4 albums. So I guess that's the worst case scenario.
I think there's always a danger, right? So there's always a risk factor. So if you've established a sound and then you change it, you're instantly going to have 50% people like you, 50% don't, or 50% be like, oh, I prefer the old Rush, don't like the new Rush. People are like, oh no, I only like the new Rush, I only like the old Rush. So
I like
it's always
Kanye.
There's always danger with that. Personally, my opinion, just to start off, I think it's probably a better idea for a band to evolve and change things, provided they don't lose at least a core part of what they are. But I would much rather they probably the best example for a band that they've never done this is AC/DC, right? Like, who the fuck's listening to an AC/DC album? Fuck
Right.
y'all.
They got an
AC/DC.
album. They got an album coming out this year that I will be listening to.
No, so that's a case in point of why I do believe a band should grow and change, because you don't want to be 70 years old playing an AC/DC. Sorry, dude.
Wearing schoolboy shorts.
Even if you're AC/DC?
Yes. Yeah.
But,
I mean, you're selling records.
Like, if that's the shit you like, that's the shit you like, dude. Do you know what I mean? There's been innovation in a lot of genres around artists. Because even pinnacle artists like Jay-Z, yeah, he's had new flows and he's had different producers come in and work with him, and there's like his tracks have sounded different, but the core of what he's doing hasn't changed, and he's not like I wouldn't say that he's necessarily progressed and switched things up with every album that he's done.
But that's what I'm saying. I don't think you need to change every element. I think there should be a core of what your fans like about you. But you know, I think you should adapt and evolve.
Yeah, because so what, Jack? Are you saying basically that what technology and the genre moves on?
I think that's inevitable. So there's kind of if you've. I'm not arguing for either way of this yet. I'm just doing a bit of devil's advocate for Hadi's sake. But if I feel like if you've settled on your sound, you do you, boo. You know what I mean? Like BB King, man wrote one song, but he wrote it 400 different ways. Johnny Cash, like, took church songs that to me don't sound very different, but I've got 36 Johnny Cash albums or something on my computer.
But people always talk about the Rick Rubin album, where he was remixed with doing for instance Hurt and a bunch of other songs where he was stretching himself. He was doing other styles. So that's actually a good case, because look, he had an established style, tried something else, and then everybody freaked out.
Yeah, well, it's interesting you bring up like. You both brought up kind of having like an established sound, because I think that's critical as well. So you try to think of a good example. So
Radiohead.
Well, Radiohead's difficult because I would say they did establish their sound a little bit and then deviated a few albums in, which I think is the more dangerous thing, because you have a fan base where they came up as kind of like a kind of rock / indie band for 3-4 albums, and then with Kid A they went left field, which I think is the dangerous route to go. Now, for all context, Radiohead is one of my favorite bands, viewers, but I think if you release an album and then you release album 2 and you've switched up, that's going to be much easier for fans to accept. If a fan is used to every album I'm going to do something different, so a perfect example would be Kendrick, right? If you have that where each album you've gone with a new theme, then your fan base is going to be more ready to accept those changes, as opposed to another good example, Rush, right? You're talking they had the kind of progressive rock sound for a string of albums, then fell into kind of the 80s synth style, and that's like a whoa, what are you doing? So I think how quick you adapt and change is important.
I think
so. You want to do it early.
Yeah, I think it's probably best to do it early for your career.
But then also hitting, because you've just said if you do it and then change second album, that's gonna give you the least angry fans.
Yeah, you just have more freedom from the beginning, right? Because people are already going to go in like, what am I going to...
You're less able to do it, because like the sophomore album, that second release is such a tough album to get right.
Yeah,
and like you can do the safe choice. You can be the AC/DC, and release the same album, or you like, or whatever, insert a ton of bands here just because you said AC/DC earlier. And
it's very like a caricature example, I suppose.
Yeah, and like it can work, because obviously they well, yeah, I mean, you said it's not good to be still going when you're 70, but they're 70 and they're still going.
Yeah, I mean, full disclosure, AC/DC are one of my favorite bands. Freaking Dirty Deeds, Highway to Hell. They had some absolutely cracking albums. They didn't change.
They're a greatest hits band.
If there
ever was a greatest hits band.
They didn't release Back in Black, which to me is like probably their seminal album. Probably to a lot of people. I think that's a fairly safe bet. That was All Highway to Hell, which came out the year before. But this is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 albums before they hit Back in Black. 8 releases of refining that sound until they released an album which proved that nobody could do that sound like they could. And now 40 years after they released that album, still nobody can do what they do the way they do it.
But Back in Black is a bit timeless.
There's still a window where you're refining your sound, but you reach a point where, you know, it's going to get boring. So even though, yes, you're talking about like 8 albums in, that's still, you know, I don't know off the top of my head, but I'm assuming it was in a short window of time. So I think a lot of the classic rock, exactly. So 5 years, like these days, your average band, if they've released 8 albums, they're probably like 20 years, 30 years into their career. I think it was different back in the day. I feel like the majority of bands were releasing stuff a lot faster. Like now, if I had a band, you know, and like, again, I'll go back to Radiohead. So I think they've got like 9 albums, but they've been around. How long would it be now? It'd probably be like close to 30 years.
Yeah.
So, you know, 9 albums across 30 years, and I would feel so disappointed if I had, you know, a lot of their albums, there were like a 4 or 5 year gap in between. I would feel so disappointed if they brought out a new album and it was like a rehash of the previous one for waiting that long. But yeah, if it's a constant cycle, album every year, then it's probably easier for me to accept more of the same.
Do you think that it's easier to evolve if you have a music style that rests on technical ability? So I think like okay, we've used Rush a lot. Okay, I'm not going to go Rush. I'm going to go somewhere else. Tyler, the Creator. He when he released Flower Boy, he specifically said in an interview that this is my rap album. This is sort of me showing that I can rap. So that was sort of him developing and learning from all different rappers and developing that skill set and improving it. If I was to look at, say, look at AC/DC, I mean, you know, how much can Malcolm really get better at rhythm guitar? I'm not sure if Malcolm is rhythm guitar. It is Malcolm and Angus.
I think so, Angus, right? Angus is the lead.
How much better can the drummer really get at 4/4?
Yeah.
You know? Whereas, okay, if we go back to Rush, in the interim period before the release of what is that album with Show Don't Tell on it? Crap. Something to do with magic. God damn it.
You're going to go down the route of a technical improvement with them inspire a new sound.
Yeah. So Neil Peart went back to drum school and learned how to do jazz drums. So after this gas leak period of the 80s, Neil Peart is coming back as a jazz drummer. So his technical ability has gone up. So is it easier to evolve if you are a band like Rush that is technical rather than a band that AC/DC, which I would say is more experiential?
Yeah, well, I wouldn't even. I agree. I think it probably is easier. I don't even know if I would use the phrase technical, but I would say, you know, if you take like a progressive band, like Rush or King Crimson or whoever, then by the very nature, people are going to, because they want to hear something new and they want to hear something different. So it is going to be genre dependent. But I would say it's also very cool when you know, you have something where you think someone's in a lane. So Tyler, for example, Perfect, you know, he would definitely be in like a lane of doing like, you know, dark rap that kind of was like shocking, and then you know, hit a switch and with Flower Boy, which is probably my favorite album from his, it's just a complete, you know, 180. There's no and you know, within those genre confines, it's not what you would have expected. But with something like a prog band, it's, you know, you're listening to a prog band because you want to hear something to you know, that's going to surprise you.
Yeah. You want to see how John Petrucci has evolved from last album to this album. What else he can bring to the table? Yeah.
I'm not sure how this links in because obviously I disappeared for a bit, but
well, I had asked, in order to evolve, does your sound need to depend on technicality? Like
then if I guess you're saying if your technical ability improves, then should that influence your sound? I was saying it's kind of almost more like tied to the genre. if a genre is expecting kind of the sound to develop, then
there are some bands which are they're more experiential. It's not about I would say punk is a lot like that, in that it's about the vibe, and it's about like the energy, and it's a lot less about like the actual music and the musicality of it.
I guess that's what it's like for me. Like I've always drifted to like genres where there was that expectation of development. You know, I've never really been like a punk fan in general, and or like a kind of, I guess, like, you know, if it's like foraying into like classic rock sounds, I've always kind of drifted towards the more like probably
virtuosos, your Van Halens,
or like that. So I guess I'm just seeking out something to surprise me. So I would gravitate towards artists that do develop and appreciate that as a choice.
Okay, someone that I would say was an experiential band that people went to for the vibe, but then pushed out of that and did their own thing, I would say, is like Eminem, because Eminem started off with Marshall Mathers, this sort of like horrorcore rap thing that he was doing, like look at like Criminal and Kill You, this sort of Detroit horrorcore thing that they just sort of took and ran with. ICP and Insane Clown Posse, I think, is from Detroit, so it was just a big sort of thing there. But then I think there was a little lull period where Eminem, like if you look at Relapse and where he's trying to do this different sound, and then for me, if you look at say Kamikaze is when he really sort of goes, okay, I've been paying attention to the scene. I see what's going on with it. Here's my take on it.
I think Eminem's problem is that he could only make good music when he was like broke and a drug addict. Like, I think for him as a specific example, he was always like railing against the establishment, right? And now you look at him, he's like the most successful rapper in terms of sales. He is the establishment. It's kind of hard to kind of be like the underdog, fuck the world when you're like on top of it.
Yeah, no,
that's a weird example, but I do know from the little bits I've heard of his newer stuff, it does kind of feel like he's recapturing something that there was a big lull, but it's kind of like it doesn't feel real, when you listen to some of like the like anguish and pain on like his first couple of albums, like that can't be captured again because of the position he's in.
Yeah,
I think that it's quite an interesting person to choose because there has been a lot of evolution over his career, and it's a very celebrated career. Like economically, and the amount of fans that he's picked up and awards, and has released amazing music. But I feel like he's either evolved out of what made him a good artist in the first place, or his evolution as an artist is just parallel to his life changing, and he's unable to capture. Because actually, it's quite interesting going back to
it is parallel, and he can't avoid that.
But going back to AC/DC,
well, he hasn't.
They've got a fuck ton of money. They've got all the money in the world. They're still singing about the same stuff, and it's still authentic as when they owned nothing but the boots they were wearing and going down to a strip club with their last $10. Do you know what I mean? Like just pounding beers. So why has that artist been able to hang on to it while achieving similar levels of success, but then in a different genre it's not gone down as well?
I think it is so genre dependent, because you like fans of like classic rock styles want to go back and capture that moment. Be a lot, like say like older listeners would probably want to like relive the experience of their youth, just like I guess I would get like joy from listening to stuff that I was loved 10 years ago. So I think there is something about wanting to like be in that moment. So for a fan of a band like AC/DC, they do want that sound so that they can capture a time in their life.
And maybe the ideas within AC/DC are a bit simpler than say with hip hop, where you're bringing in a whole lot. It's mostly vocal, whereas I would say with AC/DC, really you could probably it'd be a lot easier to design an AI to make an AC/DC song than it would be to design an AI to make a rap song. Because what you would just say, okay, drinking, topic, drinking, I know, a car, the devil.
But could you also not like, because we're looking at AC/DC specifically, but if you look at
I hate by the way the fact that AC/DC has become the driving band for this discussion.
could you not boil down rap and hip hop to those like wrong but stereotypical factors of being like, yeah, again, drink, money, women, like
you absolutely
it's
could,
fairly similar source material.
You absolutely could, but hip hop like goes into other areas and it celebrates going into other areas. Classic rock, I haven't found a lot of classic rock albums which stray into other territory.
I think the best example of like the big heavy hitters is Zeppelin. I think you look at Zeppelin, they were kind of started off as kind of just a straight blues band almost, singing I guess I wouldn't necessarily say the lyrics have changed or developed, but I'd probably say instrumentally they were kind of like a blues rock band, and then as they went later on to their career, they then incorporated like almost like proto progressive elements, which has always made them one of my favorite like 70s bands.
A lot of the music they recorded early on were like not necessarily standards, but they were songs that
covers.
Yeah, a lot of people were working on and had their own versions of.
Yeah,
but then
they started writing their own.
Yeah, they've ended up as the definitive version of it and launched from there.
Which isn't necessarily a bad thing. In fact, a lot of people are doing that. So, the guitarist,
Jimmy Page,
Joe Strummer.
No, from Cream.
Eric Clapton.
Clapton, the Stones. They did bring the rhythm and blues artists from America, the sort of obscure rhythm and blues artists from America, and brought them to England. And in fact, some of these, if you were to, like interviews with some of these like rhythm and blues artists, they appreciate that because they was largely unknown in America, and then they were brought to prominence by Clapton, by the Stones. So it was at the time. You have to look at the cultural context.
Yeah, that's a good point.
I was thinking, like, I'm looking through it now. It's definitely less prominent. I've been looking for the lyrical structure and stuff, but it's definitely there. I wouldn't say that it's necessarily like easier to boil down classic rock, because classic rock is still a huge genre. Because like if you can think of like the Guns N' Roses and the Aerosmiths on one level of it, but I would say it goes all the way down to the prog rock leaning like King Crimson's and
it's not a good genre label, to be honest.
Sabbath.
Yeah.
Because classic rock, it doesn't define the musical content, it just defines the time period. So shit from the 90s is going to be classic rock pretty soon, right? Or to some people they might see it as classic rock now, like
I've
fucking
googled
grunge.
it and OK Computer's come up, so
yeah, see, that's insane. That's blowing my mind. I think classic rock should be banned as a label. I don't.
Yeah, true. Yeah. Right. I mean, I've heard people call hair metal classic rock, and I would very much disagree with that.
Yeah, it's just too ambiguous.
Yeah,
but I think like if you if you can treat rock as a genre and say classic rock is part of it in the same way that like really conscious, lyric driven and content driven hip hop is a part of the rap hip hop genre.
Yeah.
I don't know why I'm so offended.
No, I see what you mean.
You could settle on AI things, but only on the very surface level of both.
Yeah. There are exceptions in both. I mean, yeah, you've got DMX on the one hand, and then you've got Midnight Marauders album on the other hand, and then you've got your AC/DC, Back in Black, normal standard themes, and then what else?
Dark Side
from
of
the
Moon.
Classic rock? Yeah, I'd call that prog. I was thinking more, I don't know, extreme.
Would you
maybe?
Would you consider that different to? Would you consider prog? I would consider Floyd definitely some parts more than others, but I would say they are a progressive rock band, and I would.
Well, what else could you say they
progressive
are?
rock? Well, you could just call them progressive. People use that as a genre by itself
Right.
when it doesn't have the elements of like guitar and stuff and drums being so prominent. But I would say that falls under rock's umbrella.
Yeah, because of Gilmour.
Yeah.
It's very, very bluesy. I think Led Zeppelin's a perfect sort of example in that, like Hattie said, their earlier stuff is really rocky. And then once you get to Physical Graffiti, Houses of the Holy, Houses of the Holy, it's got strange rhythms, syncopated beats. That's sort of what I think of prog. Strange time signatures, syncopated beats, almost jazzy.
Yeah. I think as well, like when just going back to the kind of main topic, like when you're talking about like the benefit I get from like listening to an artist evolve and change or a band is almost like you get to follow them through time. So you get to kind of live through the experiences they've lived through. You might not like every album, but it's kind of cool to be like, oh, okay, then, probably like the most chronicled one would be like the Beatles is another good example.
Yeah.
So you kind of like look through them starting off straight laced and having kind of all these experiences, discovering drugs and then just going off the wall from like Sgt. Pepper's onwards. And it's kind of like when you do listen to that stuff, you kind of like, oh, this is like a moment in time that I'm experiencing. Well, versus if you've got an artist where you like their discography, but it's kind of all fit into the same boat. It's kind of, again, you're just listening to it in a vacuum, and there's no like cultural context, which is why I personally prefer the evolution if I was to choose. But it depends. It does depend on the artist. I just don't want the same sound again, even if that sounds good. I don't think you're wasting your time regurgitating.
No, I'm fully with you. I think a hard-working band that's traveling and playing you want to see them evolve. You want to see them get closer together. You want to see them collaborating more. You want to see them get better at their instruments. I think that's what the new album should reflect. It shouldn't be, this is just a money grab. We need a payday. Here's an album.
Yeah, but that see again. This needs to be the last time we mention this, but again, a band like AC/DC right now, I see them performing live as just cashing in a check. I'm like, surely not, 50 years into your career, whatever. Sure,
do you think they need to cash in a check?
Jet fuel costs money, bro.
I mean, you. Do you
not think they could live off royalties at this point?
Well, it's interesting because this is kind of a different topic, but it's interesting. I don't know if you guys ever saw, there was like an interview with like Metallica where they were saying they can't stop touring.
Oh yeah, but they've had a fucked career. They started off as boys, no business acumen. They just wanted to get out there and thrash people's faces off. They've been fucked throughout their career.
They're still one of like, if you're talking about like, if you were like, oh, name top 5 most known rock or metal bands, they're always going to be in someone's list, right? So the expectation is a band that huge could retire at any point and just live happily. But like I said, when I saw the interview saying that they've got all these commitments, and obviously they have a huge team. All of those people, it's their jobs. They're I think they are probably still going to get enjoyment from writing, but it's not something they can back out. There's so many financial commitments.
I feel like with some bands, like Metallica are so like unanimously known, and everyone's listened to them growing up. But I feel like they have less die-hard, will go do anything, listen, buy all of the stuff, keep going forever, all this sort of stuff. I feel like they have less fans than other similar artists.
Well, again, on the main discussion, they're probably a great example of a band that tried to change and evolve, and pretty much all of their fan base was like, nah, not having it. Like, the diehard, people that are listening from Kill 'Em All to And Justice, they're going to be like, fuck you. And then obviously they try to go back. I suppose a little, like, kind of in parallel, like to Eminem, they tried to go back to bring people back. But again, I think that was a bad decision.
That's probably one of the reasons that they're still needing to tour, is because they deviated.
As in they fucked their career. You think financially they fucked their career?
Yeah, I think
they changed and then sold the most records, like with self-titled, right? Which was probably the point where a lot of fans split.
Yeah, but then what came after it? Like,
Loads
got a whole lot of nothing.
Load Unload, Sent Anger.
Great, yeah.
It's a bit
S&M.
of a yeah. For me, that's a complete lull up until Death Magnetic, and then they sort of.
But definitely, I think with them and Eminem, two perfect examples. They fucked it because they reacted to the fan backlash and then went back, and it felt very forced. So both those artists, I think it's kind of like, it's almost like they caved into the original fan base and ended up doing maybe like an older version of themselves, but it didn't represent where they were now, and so it doesn't sound genuine to me.
How much of that was the band versus Rick Rubin? Because Black Album is what you're talking about. Where what
albums did Rubin produce though?
I think it was the Black Album is where he came in with the biggest influence.
I have to get on the research for this.
Before we get too into this, it has been 2 hours.
It has indeed.
We should probably wrap this up.
Do we want to give any final thought? Oh, let's go around. So, Hadi, final thoughts on
the
development of new sounds, or refining a sound that defines you as an artist or a band? What are the thoughts?
Yeah.
Final thoughts.
So I'd say final thought is it depends. It depends on the genre. Primarily the genre, and again, kind of when you make that change. But for me personally, the bands that I love the most are the bands that kind of made changes and grew and did different things each time. If I'm going back to listen to a long discography, I want each album to sound unique and representative of how they were at that moment in time. So I would say overall, I would want change and development.
Cool. Dennis?
Similar lines to Hadi in that it depends on the band. Personally, I want development. I want to see you get better at your craft. But I completely appreciate that this is your full-time job, and if you need to pay the rent and you just need to bang out an album, get a couple of singles out so that you can go on tour. Then go ahead and do it. But
it's the cynical viewpoint there, the cold hard truth.
Cold hard truth, still got to pay the bills, don't you? These people have families, and there's an industry around some of these bands of roadies and the whole crew that they have families too. So a band is almost like a small business in and of itself. So. Yeah, if you need to keep your small business going, go for it. But what I want to hear is artistry. Yeah. What I want to hear is development and pushing boundaries.
I guess the regurgitation, just provoked by what you said, the regurgitation almost exposes the kind of industry element, which I don't want. I want the music to be from the heart and genuine. And if it's I'm churning out an album because I know it will sell, that kind of exposes it as, oh, this is someone just doing a job. Which is why I have a problem with loads of times, but sorry to interrupt.
Yeah, no, you can see the strings, and you don't want it to totally takes you out of it.
The puppet master of puppets.
They knew. They were so ahead of their time.
Jack, final thoughts?
Yeah, I think I've got less of a problem with an artist not kind of breaking the mold than it sounds like is the general vibe here. I think that because music is so huge, and an artist not only lives within their genre and not only lives within their release to release, but they live within music as a whole. And I can go down a rabbit hole of an artist that releases very similar music, but over decades of a career, just as easily as I can go down one who's taking me on a journey from their first release to where they grew to as a musician. So I think it's I would say it's disappointing to get something you aren't expecting sometimes. That can be bad. But if you know that what's coming will be more of the same, you can have those expectations met just as satisfyingly as discovering something completely new or seeing something that you love and a sound from a new perspective as the artist's developed as well.
So, like, yeah, if you like the sound, if you like the band, then you're not going to mind that this is just sort of it's the same album as last time, but different songs.
Kind of, yeah. It's like if this Deftones album had ended up being Diamond Eyes 2 or White Pony 2, I wouldn't have been mad. I wouldn't have necessarily loved it and, shouted it from the rooftops. But I like those albums. I could do with more of those albums. If there was a couple of tracks on there where I was like, these are standout tracks, that's really good. The rest of them, I probably won't listen to them too much by choice. I'm okay with that.
I think that Diamond Eyes is a good example for this question as well, because that's a good example of like an album with a band like kind of, in the middle of their career, like, way into their career established, and they kind of came out with like a sound that was new and refreshing and didn't rely on what they'd done before, which was great. It was great for them to do that, even though they've got an established fan base. So it kind of mirrors what I said, where it's nice to have a band release something and be like, okay, this is, you're taking a risk, but it's still them, Right. I think that's good. I think we talked about a lot.
Cool.
Too much.
Yeah. So next time we'll be looking at Tyler the Creator's discography. Given a well, do you want to put them in order, or do you want to just lay them out on the trash it to goat scale? Because that kind of gives us.
Well, I mean, I think. Yeah, I was going to say normally with tier lists, I think it's like they'll go into your A, Bs, and Cs or whatever. Yeah. But within A tier, you can still have one be above the other, or in front of the other. Yeah. We can wrap up. We're going to do a review as well. Do another review.
I don't know, because I feel like we'll do elements of review with each album we look at, probably.
Good point. So
if we've ended up post 2 hours for this one, I feel like looking at is it 6 or 7 albums?
Yeah, I remember. That's a very good point. Okay.
1, 2, 1, 2. Okay, we're not going to do music inspired by the Grinch, but good shit.
Okay, so I think what we'll look at doing then, what we'll look at doing is I was going to say we'll do the tier list, we'll do the album discussion, and then again we'll have like another general topic like this to round things off, go from there, and then in the future we'll then look at another album in more depth.
Cool.
Awesome. Cool. Should we wrap it up?
Peace.
All right. Hope everyone enjoyed.